Hello and welcome to World Talks, where every word matters. My name is Sasha Farbach. Diplomatic treason. Those were some of the accusations leveled at former Polish Defense Minister Antoni Macierewicz as a Polish government commission looks into Russian influence within the country. These are results of the latest efforts by Warsaw to sniff out any nefarious Kremlin activities. Now, to discuss all this further, I'm delighted to welcome my guest today, Wojciech Przybylski, the editor-in-chief of Visegrad Insight. Good to have you in the studio. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me again.
So let's looking at this. I'm struck by this diplomatic treason, but given the recent findings, it looks like there will be criminal proceedings leveled against former defense minister. What's your first take out of this? I mean, this is a surprise that we know this is coming. How do you assess this in the bigger picture of Russian hybrid activities?
No, I think we know a lot about Russian hybrid activities. The fact is that they were not properly documented by subsequent governments. The past two terms, when all across the West the Russian operations have been only increasing, the Polish government did nothing to document them at home in Poland, where they were also taking place. And so the commission that today shows some of these findings, and there is the political highlight, including a potential file to the prosecutor office to follow the code on diplomatic treason. It's a legal term. Then we will see further proceedings, and essentially what will need to be done is what happens in many other countries. In Czech Republic, it's been happening for many, many years. For instance, is a white book on these vulnerabilities, because we need to talk about them openly, also in a country that has a global brand of being impeccable for Russian influence. But it's not, and we're just starting to have this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Also, I mean, what came to light as well, particularly in military matters, it was Mr. Macierewicz who very much, I think, made Poland weaker in terms of defense issues that are relevant and important now. I think one was about a refueling jets in midair, that he said no to that project, a whole list and litany of things. But I mean, the man himself, he was already controversial when he was in the previous Law and Justice government. They themselves let him go. Was that a warning sign, do you think, that they ignored?
It's a very mysterious character in the Polish politics, and in the history of this far-right government and far-right party in Poland, he has always been in the shadows and always been very close to the front by being in the shadows. One of the biggest accusations that we have talked about for many decades, and that has not been picked up by previous government, was that he actually contributed to the solution and the breaking down of the Polish intelligence network in the world, and especially when we've been conducting allied operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, and subsequent and also documented now earlier activities of this individual have been oftentimes undermining Polish ability to deliver of what we promise as allies in the NATO alliance, and also delivering security at home. So that's a bigger picture. But in details, yes, you're right that there are some activities, there are some actions that were undertaken by Mr. Macierewicz, and the type of action that led even the right-wing government, right-wing president, to fire him, to demand that he's fired, to be in conflict with this individual. And yet again, he was coming again with mysterious leverage on the far-right politicians. The depth of the involvement of this personality in undermining our collective security needs to be documented and needs to be done right, precisely because it is now the time of the global hot conflict on our border, and no such action can be further tolerated, monitored. Action needs to be taken now.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a key word there, presidential. President. We have the presidential elections in Poland coming up early next year. These kind of findings and these kind of conclusions of not just Mr. Macierewicz, but also other former law and justice ministers and associates, what kind of impact does this have now on that upcoming presidential election? Will this work to the advantage of the ruling coalition? How will voters interpret this?
Hopefully, And I think this is also a promise of the government and of this commission. This will not be a political issue in the campaign. I don't believe a word now of what I'm saying, but at least you see an effort not to have a partisan line in this commission. It's a state process, state overview that involves multiple evidence, experts, a lot of proceedings, and hopefully it is a due process. It has nothing to do with the electoral process. The earlier stage of this commission, when it was set up in the previous by the previous government, it was done. It was called Lex Tusk because it was in the middle of the political campaign. It was set up when Law and Justice former government knew it was losing ground in terms of political popularity, and it was trying to undermine Donald Tusk in the process. Now, we should not be mistaken for what this commission is all about, because it is to do what actually President Duda has said and promised, to investigate this long overdue influence of Russia in Poland, the long overdue investigation, not the influence. And to be done right, it needs to be taken out of the political elections equation. Of course, there will be always some overlaps or some undertones, but I think it is essential to underscore this is to be done continuously and from the perspective of the state security and also involvement of experts from groups that actually track Russian operations to bring a bigger picture and have a white book of our vulnerabilities, because essentially what we're talking about is not pointing a finger. Of course, here we have a bit of a theater there also connected to the prosecutorial charges. But this is about showing vulnerabilities one by one, and there are many more, because Russian operations also in Poland, like in the West, have been existing there for a decade at least, or longer. We know, we can assume for sure. And we need to track them, open it to the public in order to build our own resilience.
You're also saying showing vulnerability here, but also making a point to the public. In your mind, is this now a part of let's say, the promises fulfilled by Prime Minister Tusk and his government? Is this something that he's delivering on this front? Is that how you interpret it?
No, on the political and partisan line, now I can switch, let's take another perspective. I think he is doing what he promised to his electorate, and he promised to go hard on whoever is credibly suspected of wrongdoings in all fronts. And here is a Russian chapter. There is also corruption money. Also today there were arrests. There is a deportation of a person, an individual under prosecutorial investigation, charged, or he will be charged with serious corruption allegations. So yes, Donald Tusk is doing the hardballing in terms of communication, because he is definitely politicizing this process. But I think it's not about politicizing all of it or generalizing it to the point of extreme or absurdity, but pointing to individual responsibilities in the letter of as it is in the letter of the law. And
I think this is also something ongoing. You mentioned also this other individual who is going to be Mr. Schopa, I think his name, businessman, very much about siphoning money. There is still elements to this, and are we getting to the source? Are we finally, let's say, removing everything that was bad in all this, or is there more to come in these investigations?
It's like gardening. There are bad plants growing back, and there's always something to plow the garden. So I think it is a process in which we will continue to have a deeper, further investigation. We will be also identifying new loopholes, and it's just a process we need to be aware, with visits to the doctor and vaccinations. We do that constantly, or at least we're aware this is necessary.
Right, so apple a day keeps the doctor away. In this sense, we say political committees keep bad things away, potentially, right? We'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your insights, Wojciech Przybylski. Always a pleasure to have you in the studio. Thank you.
Thanks again.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks. My name is Sasha Farbach. Stay tuned for more right here on TVP World. Goodbye.